Hey guys, this is Daniel Dr. D, and this is going to be my review of the Schiit Lokius 6-band equalizer. There's a number of reviews on YouTube and online. You guys can read about this if interested in it, but I'm just going to give you my opinion of it and what I thought about it. And I purchased this directly from Schiit Audio. It was about $330, I think, plus shipping. I think it was about 350 bucks, all said and done, when I acquired it. I don't get any loans or favors or anybody from any companies, so I do everything myself. But nevertheless, I was just curious about it. I used to have the prior model called the Loki, but I never really got into it. Now, I'm going to cover all the negative parts of this thing first, and then give you all the positives about this. The first thing I just want to tell you, I've never really been a fan of Schiit Audio's build quality, so I would just give the build quality about a 5 or 6 on a scale of 10. Like the Aretha in the back, I give that a 10. The build quality on this knob sound that costs $35, I give that a 10. Beautiful build quality on those. So negatives I want to tell you about. These knobs here are kind of low, so when you try to rotate them with your finger, your fingers do get cramped in here. They also do not have stepped attenuation, meaning that they're just smooth as you rotate them, which I don't like because it's kind of hard to remember where you put them, if you rotate them into a certain position. And you have your XLR input. If you want to do that, you just flick the switch up or down. Or if you want to use RCA, I have that down below, which is what I use. I don't use XLR or balanced inputs or outputs. And this here is a bypass switch. And that bypass switch, if you have it in the up position, then you will be playing it through the circuit. If you don't want that, you just push this thing down, and now it will just bypass the circuit. Now this is a powered device, so it does come with a separate power plug adapter, and I'll show you the back side of it in a moment, and then I'm going to kind of go over those little features for you, and then we'll discuss the sound and what's going on here. Okay, so now here we have the back side. You see the XLR inputs and outputs here, as well as RCA, and then you have your on-off switch. Now something very interesting that you should know about this is that you don't have to have this device turned on if you're using the bypass switch. So if you don't want to use the circuit, you don't even have to turn the unit on. The reason I found that out is by accident, because I just, forgot to turn it on one time, and I was playing, and I'm like, hey, I didn't turn it on, and it was still playing. So that's how I found that out. So from left to right, I'm going to tell you guys what the frequency is. So you got 20 hertz on this knob over here. You got 120 hertz on this one, 400 hertz range on this one, 2,000 hertz on this guy, and then 6,000 hertz here, and then 16,000 hertz on that knob there. Now, something kind of interesting about this, which is totally different than the tone controls that you see on the Aretha over here behind you, is that whenever you adjust any one of these knobs, the change is very subtle. Like if I were to turn any of these to, say, a 3 o'clock position, you'll notice a difference, but they're sort of subtle. It's not like a very dramatic difference. So these are, again, just small changes that you're trying to make. Maybe if you have a bump in your mid-range, you might want to bring down the mid-range somewhere over here. These two knobs here, I found out, this is covering your mid-range. These are going to be covering your top end mostly, and then your bass and mid-bass over here roughly. And like for when, for example, I noticed like when I was adjusting this knob with one of my speakers, I noticed that it helped remove maybe a little bit of cabinet resonance I may have heard with some excessive bass or something like that. Again, subtle. Now, I know some of you prefer not to use tone controls, and that's fine. If you don't want to have anything in the audio chain or in the audio signal, anything additional, then you want the most purity that you can get. That's understandable and fine. It just depends what are the compromises that you're making. The other way I could look at this is just say, is it really audible? And there's the psychology of it, like knowing that it's in the circuit even when you have the bypass switch, it's still something that's between, the preamplifier and the amplifier. So some of you may not even care about that. But I would just tell you, when I experimented with the bypass switch, so in other words, if I were to go, say, with the switch up or down and just listen to it, set everything flat, I could not hear a single difference whatsoever. I wouldn't be able to pass a blind test. I wouldn't be able, if you switch this on me and said, okay, now listen, I guarantee you I wouldn't be able to tell you which one is which. So if it makes you feel any better and you can get past that effect or that placebo effect for some, or maybe there are some people with some really good, great hearing that can tell the difference. Maybe they can, I don't know, but I certainly could not hear a single difference. In fact, something very strange, almost concerning in a way, is that when I used it in conjunction with my tube preamp, it got even quieter, which is strange to me. And I was like, what? It was even quieter. So if I were to put my ear up to the speaker, I didn't hear as much as I did prior to that. So I'm thinking, well, God, is something in there maybe taken away from the music? I tell you, when I unplug this unit, I just cannot tell any difference. It does not compromise the air coming from the tube preamplifier, nothing whatsoever. So as far as the advancements that the hi-fi industry has made, I think this reflects that. They've done an extremely good job. It's a completely analog system. There are digital methods of doing this with computers if you want, but I'm not interested in that. I try to stay away from as much digital technology as I possibly can in my life, at least what I can get away with. And the sound quality is fantastic. I had, say, a little bit of a bump in my DIY speaker for the mid-range on some albums. I could tone it down a little bit by just rotating these counterclockwise, these two here, and that would help with the mid bass a bit. Now, personally, if I had a tube preamp like the one you see up here, I would, if they had a mid-tone control, that would have been the ultimate for me. But because I don't have a mid-tone control on my Aretha tube preamp here, I only have treble and bass, I felt compelled to experiment with the Lokius to see if I could play around with the mid-range a little bit. Overall, I think that Schiit Audio did a really good job on the device. I think it will help with some cases. People, have this mindset that everything's got to be as flat and the frequency response has to be as flat as possible. As soon as you put any stereo in any room, nothing is flat anymore. You mix everything, different components, different seating position. Everything affects the way everything sounds. But as soon as you put any equipment in a room, you're automatically changing your acoustics, the way things sound and whatnot. So there's no real way around it. But if you just don't want to have any electronics in your circuit, I totally get it. So when I use this thing, when I've tested it, I just put it away in the background inside one of these little cubby holes inside the cabinet behind here where I'm pointing, and so I don't see it. And I think it's a good thing to do because you feel less compelled to fiddle with it or touch it. And if you just want to make minor tweaks, it's great. Sometimes you get albums where they're a little bit hot on the top, a little bit sizzly. Something you guys, I want to just a little input based on my experiences. Whenever you're watching reviews online and you hear demos where somebody's touting how good a speaker is, you will often see them use really good recordings. And I'm kind of not a fan of that because, let's face it, you put a good recording in just about anything, it's going to sound very impressive to the listener. So if I'm playing jazz, from the 50s and 60s, I want a delicate balance of I don't want something that's so perfect that you're going to hear every flaw, So there has to be that kind of balance with it. And with that said, I think that some of the older recordings from those eras, sometimes you do need to take a little bit of hotness off the top, or maybe you may want to add a little bit to it. It's not going to make a bad system good. It does help enhance certain things. I don't believe that, based on my listening experiences, that it will interfere with the sound quality. As I stated, in my two preamplifiers, I did not notice any air whatsoever taken away from the preamplifier or my tube amplifiers. I noticed exactly the same beautiful air. It didn't constrict the air. The separation of the music, absolutely exquisite. And I couldn't tell. So hats off to Schiit Audio. They did a great job. So until next time, we'll be back at you soon.